How's that? Good enough?
Well, I hope it's good enough because we're live.
Well,
good morning, everybody. This is Steve Attarian. I'm here with Dr. Stephen Wilson. We are here today to talk about non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, something we've discussed a lot about sugar and its effect on our body. And I'm expecting that maybe the fatty liver disease has some attributes that sugar will affect. But Dr. Wilson, good morning.
Well, good morning, Steve. How are you?
I'm blessed. Thank you.
Indeed you are.
I'm going to let you talk for a moment. I'm going to step up here for a second. Talk, sir, talk.
What we are going to discuss today is probably one of the greatest problems that will fight its way into Americans' disease. I think that we need to look at the source of the problem of this, in that from all of this sugar that we're consuming to create energy is creating a host of diseases. There's not one disease that I can think of that somehow isn't married to sugar. They're out there, I'm sure, but sugar, if we begin to source back, you'll find that it's foundational to diseases. And it's within that, we need to discuss why all these kids are coming down with this non-alcoholic fatty disease.
So talk a little bit about non-alcoholic fatty liver disease.
Well, the liver is designed to purge the system and store fat, create the bile that digests all of the things in, but clean it. And as you overload it with sugar, and there's no place to store it, then all at once you have created a fibrous organ that can't function. And when it can't function, it can't clean the blood. When it can't clean the blood, then you're putting toxins back into the tissue. And it's from that little thing that we begin to feel the effects of something that we so glibly took advantage of, which was Diet Coke. Okay? If just think about this, Steve. I do it all the time. When I'm driving down the street at about lunchtime, the kids are going over to the fast foods for lunches. And all of the fast foods that I've looked at, they offer a sandwich with a Coke.
With a Coke. Or Diet Coke. Right,
excuse me. Or something like that.
Yes.
So the object here is sweet tea.
That's another name thing.
They're going over to have something to eat, but the subtleties of the guys owning the business know that they have to walk away with energy. So they give them something very, very inexpensive. Sugar is very inexpensive, and they give them a bucket load of sugar, so they walk away from that thing energized, robust, if you will, full of sugar and processed foods, and go back and sit down and go to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the meantime, their liver and their whole body is reacting to what they just thought was food. So one of the questions that we might just quickly cut, why is it that kids are moving away from the foods in our schools?
Moving away as in going out to have fun with their teenage friends and going to a fast food restaurant instead of...
Why would they not do that? Why would they not eat in a school cafeteria?
Because of freedom, I think. I don't know.
Well, what I hear is that the foods there too are processed. So, they're not getting what they need somewhere in their diet. And it's much more fun to go across the street and have the fast food, the processed things, and it tastes good. But in the process, 48% of these young boys, teenage, that are overweight are coming down with this dreaded disease. And as you get through this thing, as we understand, and by the way, they don't even know it. And the side effect of this is that the language in medicine today, research, is that somewhere between 30 and 50% of all Americans have this disease, and they don't even know it.
Non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is what you're referring to.
30 to 50%, and they don't even know that they're diseased.
So let's reference the Life Extension magazine where this research was published just recently, and there was 100+ doctoral medical papers that were backing it up. Mm-hmm. And we know that the American public doesn't always want to face the fact that good, healthy, nutritional food is not as convenient, not as tasty, not as inexpensive as processed, dead, non-enzymatically living food that offers us bulk but no nutrition. And we talk about here on this particular Walk to Success show is nutritionally dense food. Mm-hmm. That is enzymatically alive, or what you refer to as organic, and healthy for us. And I can tell you that it is an amazing difference in my life and in my amount of energy that eating well, I do exercise, and adding some Nefesh Products, the ATP B Prime and B Pro, helped me to enjoy life at 47 years old at a level I didn't through my entire 30s, and I sure didn't in my early 40s. And I have more energy today, more health and vitality than I did through my 30s and my early 40s. I made a change in my life at 45 years old, and I will never go back. At 45 years old, I was 318 pounds. I was smoking a buttercup, were you? I was a big buttercup. I was smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. I was consuming alcohol on a week-to-weekendly basis. And my life is completely different. And it is way for the better. And some people don't want to make those hard decisions. They don't want to be disciplined in their eating and their exercise. I feel as though I have added years, if not decades, to my life. And the quality of that life experience is amazing. So talk a little bit about, these teenagers, why teenagers today are dealing with a 50% showing up with 50% of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease in their in the boys that are already overweight. They were teenage boys. 48% of those that are already obese have this disease. Talk a little bit about why that is.
Well, I think we need to discuss lifestyle since you've brought that up. You don't know whether it's intentional, but you've got a group of chemists in the background that are being paid to move product. And you can't assail them because that's what they're doing. But when you take our capitalistic society, which, I'm an entrepreneurial and I fully believe in that system. But when you're looking at shelf life and you can take something that's alive out and backfill it with something that's dead that has a shelf life, and then because the fact that you wouldn't eat it if it didn't have sugar and salt in it. So, the common sense here approach would be to put sugar and salt in that. First of all, sugar, we know, metabolizes to an opiate-like substance. So why would a person who is under stress probably has a little self-esteem issue because they're gaining weight, and as they go through the teenage years, they've got a multiple of issues in their personality as to being accepted. So why wouldn't they take sugar?
Well, they have a hard time avoiding it. I mean, if you look at the desserts we have for breakfast, not to use any particular brand names, but the pop beep stuff that's coated with sugar on the outside, the Captain Boop cereal and the Frosted Boop cereals, and all of those things, you look at the ingredients, the second and sometimes even the third ingredients are sugar.
Well, even to carry that just a little bit further, last year, Skip Reeves and I did a radio show, and he did the research and he found the top 10 cereals are 50% sugar. 50% sugar. 50% sugar.
So I'm putting a bowl of, an 8-ounce bowl of cereal with 1% non-fat milk, which has X amount of grams of sugar in it, into a bowl. So I'm ingesting 4 ounces of sugar.
Mhm.
That's like a half a cup or more of sugar. I could just take my cup and pour it in my mouth.
And there are those that do.
I know that there was, when I was a kid, we'd take a spoon and the table sugar, and we'd spread it out over top of the cereal because it didn't taste right without the sugar.
Now, don't you find that just a tad bit amazing? It's already
It
sugar.
tastes good.
I know. And it's a stimulant. So
But when I was a kid, it wasn't sugar. It wasn't Frosted Flakes. It was cornflakes. But not that there wasn't sugar in cornflakes back then. But I'm assuming there's more now.
you talk about how expensive is something like this. If you're looking for nutrients, not food, but you're looking for nutrients, and the body thrives on nutrients, not food. Okay?
Right.
Now that has to be one of those understood items. So you stack up your money over here and you go buy things that are highly processed, highly loaded with hormones, and things of that nature, and the nutrients, they're void. So you give them $100 and there's nothing in it. What we want people to understand is if you make this one little move with us over here and spend the same $100, not only can you get things that will clean the liver, clean the blood, clean the brain, build your tissue, build your endurance, in fact, build your cognitive skills, calm your patient, calm you down. For the same $100, you're getting 2 for 1.
Mm-hmm.
When people understand that concept and the fact that they could avoid a lot of the heartaches of disease, I would think, given that information, a person sitting there thinking would say, look, I'm looking at my parents, and they went through this world where they thought they were bulletproof, and look at them now. They are not bulletproof. And if we're on the same road, doing the same thing, and I made this point the other day, this is an observation, but it's a published piece of work. The 1 person out of 1,000 now reaching the age of 65, I think, will be free of pharmaceutical drugs. 1 out of 1,000. If a guy put that target on the wall and started throwing darts at it, the chances of him becoming part of the 99% is extraordinarily high. And if what these folks were doing put them in this position, would it not make common sense to say, perhaps, the chances of coming down with one of those diseases, ranging from cardiovascular issues to diabetes? And then you read these incredible statements that up to 90% of all diseases could be avoided with a change of diet and a change of lifestyle.
Well, I'm just going to play devil's advocate for a moment. And I read myself or heard myself this morning an interesting statistic, and it's just contrary to what you're saying, and I can't quite wrap my head around it. In the turn of the century, when we were ingesting 5 pounds of sugar per year versus now when we're ingesting 160 plus pounds of sugar per year, the average lifespan of an adult was about 67 years. No, 47 years. The average was the average lifespan of an adult. Now we are living into on averages 70 plus years as an average. I don't have what it is currently, but I think it's way into the 70s.
It's in its 70s.
If we're not eating as healthy, we have unhealthy lifestyles, and pharmaceuticals are a bad thing, why are we living so much longer?
Well, let's take it from 2 angles. There are those cultures that live to be 120 without anything, and the fellows are still chasing young women.
Mm-hmm.
We need to understand that. The other side of the coin, and I had this discussion with some Western medicine guys. If we took the drugs away from people today, how long would they last?
When you say drugs, you're referring to
Pharmaceuticals. Yeah. How long would the average guy that's on 5 to 6 meds make it if he didn't have his blood thinners?
We don't know that because it would be actually The doctor refused to do that and take him off those medicines because he was afraid of being sued.
Well, how long would they last? What, do you think they live very long?
I
Nobody
don't know
wants to
how
try that. But we do know that these things really sustain life. But even with that, Steve, why don't we talk about the lifestyle? And I will compare it to going to jail, so to speak. Disease to me is jail. In fact, from one of my things that drives me is I am in bondage to being free.
Okay.
Now, that freedom comes from taking control of what I eat because I'm free of all drugs. I'm free of anything like that. And my liberties of running in the mountains and carrying on versus a guy that is sitting here with a cardiovascular issue. He can't do that. So his little area of freedom is pretty short strip. A fellow that's diabetic, pretty short. He can't get away from home very far. A person who's dealing with pulmonary issues
and
on oxygen, they have limited their freedom. And if they take that oxygen away from them, as we well know, that's a pretty fast way to go. Those are the things that concern me because on the other side of the aisle, we know that nutrients will heal. We know that. So if we begin to pump organic foods that are alive, and when you talk about organic, there are levels or degrees of being alive. We've all shopped in farmers market where that nutrient or that tomato or peach is just freshly picked. They're juicy, they're warm. You give that 2 or 3 days and it's not the same.
Right.
So if we can get people to understand that it is so important and the end result of the discipline that I'm speaking of is freedom. Now, we can sit here and argue and discuss the age that people are in, but I see them, their cognitive skills are down, they can't remember, they have their senior moments, on and on and on, and they all blame it on their aging process. Well, that aging process, if we begin the sugar intake, how early does the aging process begin if it's attributed to sugar? Maybe this aging process begins when they're in their early 20s, rather than when I was growing up, it was 50s. So, and the lifestyle that comes from it, when we consider that 60 to 70% of Americans are overweight, and that weight or fat is directly related to disease. In many cases, that might be an area that we would look to and say, how can we deal with this problem?
How can we do it?
Well, understand.
Let's focus on looking at our audience instead of each other.
Okay,
You're a
I'm sorry.
beautiful man.
I know, I'm sorry. So if it is about energy, and we know that 95% of the energy of the world in the body is made via ATP, and we begin to use stimulants rather than producing ATP, you have short-circuited how we are designed. The minute we come back in with energies and understand that the principal form of building ATP is from fat. Oh, that is exactly opposite to what we're hearing today. But let me put
have heard for the last 50 years.
So here we have an analogy. We know in science that one molecule of protein will produce 4 molecules of ATP.
ATP being adenosine triphosphate,
Right.
which is the, let's just call it the nuclear reaction within the cell that creates energy.
That's right. One molecule of sugar, carbohydrate, will produce 4 molecules of ATP. Okay. One molecule of fat in the right form will produce 129 molecules of ATP. So when we see the adulterated fats, the hydrogenated, they are poison, but they put that in to preserve. So there's a reason that they hydrogenate. When we start talking about oils from avocado, nuts, things of that nature, essential fatty acids, those are the good oils.
Okay.
And they just produce this incredible amount of energy.
When we think of, I think of essential fatty oil acids or fatty oils as being, and that's not, I would like to know the difference between fatty acids and fatty oils, but you mentioned nuts, and we know that plants have some fats in them. But, you think of fats, and you're thinking cow, salmon, fish, meat. We're talking meat here. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of studies that are showing vegans are not as healthy, and vegetarians are not as healthy as those that are consuming meats. So, when you say fatty acid or fatty fats, tell us a little bit more about what that is, where that comes from.
Well, you're beginning to understand, or we're beginning to address this whole thing about where quality fats come from. They're unadulterated fats, but when let's take the homogenation aspect.
What does that mean? What is homogenation?
Well, it's the sizing of the fat molecule.
Interesting.
You pasteurize and you homogenize. So when we get dairy, now this is kind of a fun thing. The hormones that come from a cow, okay, they're designed to build something to 1,500 pounds.
A calf,
to take him to 1,500 pounds. So that hormone is entirely different than the hormones that are put in goats. So we're going to push the goat away from them. The fat molecule that comes from goat milk is already small, so it stays saturated. If you take a glass of goat milk and a glass of cow milk and put them in the fridge, in the morning, the milk will have separated to cream on the dairy side, and on the goat, it's still the same. So it's self-homogenized. And it's the fat that gives us the energy. And it is also incredibly good in building hormones, taking care of tissues. It is so profoundly important. You can't really get too much of that good fat. Now, there's a little hormone called leptin that's made in the fat molecule that tells the brain that we need to begin to burn fat.
Okay, leptin.
Leptin, L-E-P-T-I-N. So we're dealing with three hormones, particularly involved in the metabolic process of energy and controlling diet, satiety. So you have a thing called adiponectin, and you have a thing called ghrelin and leptin.
Okay.
And the ghrelin that we're finding, the control of the ghrelin, which if we get the ghrelin up, your satiety goes up, and you don't get this desire to eat everything that's not nailed down.
Mm-hmm.
So
every couple hours.
Every couple, or every, and when people browse, what is it? They graze. Thank you. So as we control these two, we get the ghrelin down and the adiponectin up, and then we throw in this little thing called leptin, and it is considered the fat burner of the body. So it's telling the body to turn on fat that's been stored for energy and convert it back into energy. But if you burn the receptor sites for leptin because of this constant grazing that we do, pretty soon your hypothalamus does not understand that, hey, there's a need, and all we do is we eat, and we graze, and we eat, and that stacks on because it's all processed foods.
And the hypothalamus is the part of your brain that releases chemicals into your body, hormones and other biochemistry that happens. and the one of the things that I heard recently was that fructose, I can't think of the term, but it was developed in Japan as a sweetener that actually turns off the satiety hormones so we can eat more and not feel full. Is that something you've heard?
I have, but the body is really an incredible put together. It
was created by an amazing.
Who didn't make mistakes. And we are designed.
Our Creator is, and He created us in His image. So, we're not ashamed to say that we're, God's creatures, and He created us in His image. So, if He didn't create a system that doesn't heal itself, that doesn't function well. I mean, it's an amazing. You know, you cut your finger and you can watch it heal itself.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you know, if I would get in a car accident, I sure want to have some doctors to fix me.
Mm-hmm.
But if, you know, just on a daily basis, you know, the same oath that doctors take, the Hippocratic Oath, was based on a philosopher whose one of his other philosophies is "Let thy food be your medicine, and let your medicine be thy food." That was another part of what the Hippocratic Oath is. You know, do not harm. You know, I mean, at first, do not harm. And yet today we're shoveling pharmaceuticals as a first line of defense, versus when I was younger, I can remember my doctor saying, "You need to eat better and get more exercise." You know, I don't know that there's an insurance claim that they can get paid by Medicare if they just say, "Get off your butt, get some exercise, and eat better."
And all of that is true. Major problem then is you need the exercise, and if you try to go out and exercise and you create the pain, the aches and muscles, you won't go out and do it again.
Right.
So we need to look at that and say, all right, there's going to be a little gain, but if we put the proper foods in the body and understood the exercise, that it was going to be a long-term program, then probably we would do it differently. And if we can build these energies and not have the muscle ache and come back and really feel vibrant the following day by creating long-term endurance type energy from ATP, you're liable to keep doing it.
Mm-hmm.
It's within that arena that when you're taking these sugars, there are short-term bursts of energy. And that's thinking about that. That's what carbohydrates, that's what glucose is. It's designed for short-term energy bursts. Protein is designed to repair. It's the fat that's designed is the fuel. And if we get this thing kind of straightened around and then understand that there are elements that we can put in the system, such as red beets, that causes the vasodilation of the arteries. And you look again at heart attacks. It is one of the principal causes of heart attacks is the shrinkage of the artery. So the endothelium is being lined and it can't expand, and we're not eating foods that causes that nitric oxide expansion in the cell to get this movement in the arteries, so we have clogged arteries.
Clogged arteries is being aligned with
Plaque.
And the plaque comes from,
Well, surprisingly, sugar.
but it's developed in
The plaque in the arteries. Well, it's the liver is to be handling a lot of this, but if you cannot clean the blood,
so if you can't filter that out,
right, then it goes back in the system. And now we're starting to deal with autoimmune diseases and all of those things. Principle to this whole thing, and which I like to really take a person from stem to stern, is when you do not eat correctly, you build this compost pile in your gut. And the gut is where 70% of the immune system starts.
70%.
70%. So if you're eating foods that are highly processed, you can't get the elimination system going. They're stuck. And you can't get that cleaned out. There are maybe 500 different kinds of bacteria in the gut, and it's supposed to be around 80% good, 20% bad. The way it is today, it's 80% bad and 20% good. So we need to look at that and say, all right, what do we need to put in our foods? The lactobacillus, for instance.
That's a big word.
That is a big word. And there's a whole bunch of bacilluses. But we need to have foods that produce that. And once we produce that, now all at once we begin to marry, depression is directly related to the health of our gut. Candace Pert, in her studies at George Washington School of Medicine, directly related to that. So you have depression and you have your immune system, all because your gut is not functioning correctly.
Only 7 out of 10. It's only 70%.
That's a small percentage.
So we're going to need to wrap it up. We're getting close to our 30 minutes, and we have a lot to explain and go through. the reason for the Steves to get together on Friday morning and discuss this with you is really to bring out all of this knowledge and research that Dr. Wilson has done over the years. And Stephen has an amazing way of explaining the biblical principles of eating well and the biblical principles of freedom being created by discipline, and referring to Deuteronomy and Proverbs and other books of the Old Testament, based on the fact that we as Americans are doing what's easy and simple versus what could be considered a little more difficult or challenging on a daily basis because we're too busy or we're too poor or we're too this or too that.
Try stubborn.
Stubborn is a good way. And I'm a living example of, by making choices, we can change our lives. And we're just here to help you make some great choices in how you eat, how you live, your lifestyle, as well as your nutritional intake. And we do have at some point, some products to discuss that we think will benefit you and help you in creating ATP and in cleansing the blood and vasodilation and some other things. But right now, we're really just trying to educate you, even though Stevie keeps using big words we can't spell or pronounce other than him. We will use magazines, we'll use books, we'll talk about the benefit of disciplined biblical eating as well as disciplined biblical lifestyles. And I think again, Stephen, is there some words you'd like to say in closing?
Where there's discipline, there's freedom. Where there's understanding, it allows you to move into the disciplined world. I think that there's a verse in Deuteronomy 28-ish, but it talks about, even though I know what is right, I will stubbornly do what I want to do. Which is how we function in America. And if everybody has to come to a point in their life when they decide that what they're doing is not right. And that's when we change. And we're just encouraging them to say the change is so incredibly valuable to them in terms of lifestyle, in terms of pain, in terms of just living a comfortable life.
Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you again next Friday at 8 a.m. And we appreciate you being here today. Click on the like button, click on the share button. Please send this out to those people around you that you know could live a happier, more vibrant life longer with some advice from Dr. Steve Wilson. Have an awesome day.
Thanks, Steve.